Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep today into the world of Black LGBTQ individuals and all the challenges they face. But we're also going to be exploring, ways to make a difference, strategies for change. And our main source, well, it's this really insightful blog post called Facing Racism, Empowering Black and LGBTQ Voices Through Strategies for Change.
And it's a fantastic post. Really dives deep into some important stuff.
Yeah, it really does. And it covers a lot of ground. We're talking history, personal stories, like what's happening on the ground, in terms of community action, and then even some self-reflection, like what can we do to help make things better?
Absolutely. And it starts right off the bat with the topic we hear a lot about these days, intersectionality. But it goes beyond, just being a buzzword. It really gets into what it truly means for Black LGBTQ folks.
Okay, so beyond that basic definition of overlapping identities, what makes it especially relevant here?
Well, the post uses phrases like compounded issues and dual marginalization.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I think those phrases really hit the nail on the head,
Yeah.
It's about facing discrimination on multiple fronts, not just from society as a whole, but often from within the very communities you identify with.
That's rough, facing prejudice from all sides.
Exactly.
And then the post goes on to give us a historical overview. And I was struck by how much, erasure there's been.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all know about Stonewall, right? But the post points out how the role of Black transgender activists like Marsha P. Johnson often gets overlooked.
Yeah, Marsha P. Johnson, what a legend.
She was a key figure in those protests, but
Yeah.
her story and so many others haven't gotten the recognition they deserve.
It's kind of crazy, right? Makes you wonder how many other stories are out there that we haven't heard.
Of tons, I'm sure. And, this historical erasure is not just a thing of the past, it's still happening today.
Yeah.
The post talks about Audre Lorde's work, especially that idea of the mythical norm, which is how society kind of favors certain identities over others. And for Black LGBTQ folks, that means constantly battling this idea that they don't fit in, not into the dominant narratives of Blackness or queerness.
It's like they're being excluded from both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
mythical norm thing is so insightful. Helps explain why the post also talks about feeling alienated from both communities.
It's incredibly isolating to not feel fully accepted by either group. And that lack of, recognition really takes a toll on the mental health of Black LGBTQ individuals, which the post gets into next.
Yeah, and that's where the statistics get really heavy. The Post cites a report from the Human Rights Campaign, and it found almost 40% of LGBTQ people of color
Wow.
have experienced mental health issues. And racism, it's like a direct contributing factor. This isn't just numbers, it's about real people's lives.
Yeah, for sure. And the blog post goes beyond those statistics, too. It actually shares some personal stories. One that stuck with me was this description of feeling like you have to constantly code switch.
Oh, code switching.
Navigating all these different spaces and never really feeling fully seen or understood for who you are.
Oh, yeah. It's like always having to be on.
It's exhausting.
I can only imagine how emotionally draining that would be.
Yeah, the post describes it as feeling like you're constantly performing, always having to be so aware of how you're being perceived by different groups.
Mm.
And that constant pressure just eats away at your mental health. It's something we need to be talking about more, openly and honestly.
Yeah, more awareness for sure. So we've talked about this historical erasure, the feeling of not belonging, and the impact on mental health. What does the blog post suggest as a way to fight back against all this?
Well, it really points to the power of, grassroots organizing and community building.
Mm-hmm.
This is where things start to feel more hopeful, I think.
Okay, yeah.
More empowering, And the post specifically highlights this group, the Black LGBTQIA plus Migrant Project.
Oh, yeah, the BMP. I was curious about them. What's so special about them?
Well, that feeling of isolation we talked about, it's exactly what groups like the BMP are trying to combat. They create these spaces, right, where Black LGBTQ individuals, especially immigrants, can come together and share their experiences. And the post really emphasizes the power of connection, like how finding that community can be a lifeline for people who feel marginalized.
It's like that saying, strength in numbers,
Right. Yeah.
knowing you're not alone. And it reminds me of that Audre Lorde quote, your silence will not protect you. It's about finding your voice and using it.
Absolutely. And the BMP, they go beyond just offering support, too. They're out there advocating for policy changes and offering workshops and cultural events. It's about empowering Black LGBTQ individuals to take action and make changes from within.
So it's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk, too, taking real action. And the blog post also talks about allies, how important they are to this movement, right?
Oh, definitely. And it's really clear that allyship is not about just empty words or performative gestures. It's about taking meaningful action to support Black LGBTQ communities.
So what are some examples of meaningful allyship that the Post talks about?
Well, it encourages non-Black LGBTQ folks and allies to really listen to and learn from Black LGBTQ voices, to educate themselves about the history and all the challenges they face, and most importantly, to use their privilege to amplify those voices and to advocate for change.
So it's about using your platform and your resources to help dismantle these systems of oppression. The blog post also talks about art and cultural expression.
It does.
Yeah.
And it highlights how Black LGBTQ artists have always been at the forefront of these movements, using their creativity to challenge stereotypes, to tell their stories, and to inspire change.
Yeah, the blog mentions some really big names,
Yeah.
James Baldwin, Audre Lorde. They use their writing to expose all that injustice. And then you've got people like Janelle Monáe, Billy Porter. They're pushing boundaries and challenging norms through their work.
What's really cool is that they're not just speaking out, right? They're creating art that reflects the Black LGBTQ experience in all its complexities. It's about representation. Seeing yourself reflected in art and media in a real and authentic way.
So it's more than just entertainment, it's social commentary. It's using art to make a statement. And that leads perfectly into education, which is the next strategy the Post brings up.
Yeah, and it's not just about basic knowledge. It's about going deeper. Understanding those nuances of intersectionality and the specific challenges that Black LGBTQ folks face. The Post even mentions the need for more educational initiatives, like within institutions, especially those focused on dismantling all that systemic racism and homophobia.
So we're talking about dismantling systems here, and the Post doesn't shy away from talking about the law either, and the need to change policies. It goes into how existing laws like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, they fall short because they don't explicitly cover sexual orientation or gender identity.
And that gap in legal protection is a big problem. And it's what the Post says needs to be addressed. It specifically calls out the need for stronger federal legislation, like the Equality Act, which would provide consistent protection nationwide for LGBTQ individuals.
Makes sense. It's about creating a level playing field,
Right.
where everyone has equal protection under the law, but the blog is very clear that legal change is just one part of the puzzle.
Oh, yeah, it's just the beginning. It emphasizes how important it is to have community engagement, lobbying, and building coalitions. All that is crucial to make sure the laws are actually enforced and that they're actually making a difference in people's lives. So we got to hold lawmakers accountable, right? Make sure those voices of Black LGBTQ individuals are heard when they're making policies.
So it's not just enough to have laws in place. We need people to be engaged, to make sure they're actually making a difference.
Exactly. And it brings us back to those grassroots movements. The Post really stresses that change often starts from the ground up. Individuals and communities coming together and saying, hey, we need better.
It's so easy to feel powerless sometimes, when you're talking about systemic issues like this. But this Post reminds us that we all have a part to play.
Oh, for sure. And, it connects to another important point. This need for a multi-pronged approach. It's not just about changing laws or grassroots organizing or education in isolation, right? It's about tackling these issues from every angle.
Makes sense, right? These issues are super complex and they're all interconnected, so the solutions can't be one-dimensional.
Exactly. And it takes, collaboration and solidarity.
Yeah.
Across different communities and groups.
So it's not just on Black LGBTQ people to do all the work. It's about all of us, right? Working together to make a world that's more just and equitable.
That's the message, right? We can create a world where everyone feels safe and seen and celebrated, but it takes everyone to make that happen.
It's powerful stuff. I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed by how big these issues are. But the Post does a great job of reminding us that even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. It all starts with each of us, right? What small steps can we take in our own lives to support Black LGBTQ people? Maybe it's having a conversation with a family member who has, outdated views, or picking up that book by James Baldwin you've been meaning to read.
It's those little things that can add up and make a real difference. You know what I thought was interesting is that while the Post highlights collective action, it also emphasizes individual choices. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have a challenge for our listeners. What's one concrete thing you can do this week to make a difference?
It doesn't have to be this huge thing. You could donate to an organization like the BMP. They're doing amazing work. Or watch that documentary about Marsha P. Johnson. Even educating yourself more about intersectionality is a good step.
Yeah, just take that first step, no matter how small. And know that you're contributing to something bigger. That's what I'm taking away from this deep dive.
And remember, this isn't about checking things off a list or patting ourselves on the back, right? It's about making real change in the lives of Black LGBTQ people, building a world where everyone feels safe and seen and celebrated for exactly who they are.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, that's our deep dive for today. We hope you learned something, and we hope you feel inspired to take action.
Remember, change starts with each of us. So let's create that more just and equitable world, one step at a time.
And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. It means taking all this knowledge and actually doing something, right? We may not be able to change the whole world overnight, but we can make changes in our own lives.
Right, exactly. And the blog post, it really hammers home that point that change starts with each of us individually. Like, what's one thing you could do, no matter how small, to support Black LGBTQ people? Maybe it's something like talking to a family member, someone who has some outdated views, or finally reading that James Baldwin book you've been putting off.
It's about taking those small steps. And they really do add up. What struck me was that the post highlighted the power of collective action for sure, but it also really emphasized the impact of those individual choices. So as we wrap up, I kind of want to leave our listeners with a challenge. What's one tangible thing you can do this week to actually make a difference in the lives of Black LGBTQ folks?
And it really doesn't need to be a huge thing. I mean, you could donate to an organization doing great work, like the BMP, or watch that documentary about Marsha P. Johnson. Even taking the time to learn more about intersectionality can be huge.
Right. It's all about taking that first step, as small as it might seem. But knowing that you're part of something bigger, that's what I'm taking away from this.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't about like checking boxes or feeling good about ourselves. This is about creating real change for Black LGBTQ people. It's about creating a world where every single person feels safe, seen, and celebrated for who they truly are.
I love that. Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We really hope this conversation got you thinking and maybe even inspired you to take action.
Remember, change really does start with each one of us. So let's all commit to building a more just and equitable world, okay? One step at a time.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep on diving deep.